Hello, I'm Eric McLain. Here's my audience. Renowned economist Milton Friedman once said, "I'm in favor of cutting taxes under any circumstances and for any excuse, for any reason, whenever possible." Today, I will be discussing why we should reduce taxes across the board on all income levels and corporations. I chose this topic because I'm an economics major here at Ball State, and this is an important topic, assuming society wants to retain its freedom and have economic growth. Specifically, I will be talking about how low taxes causes economic growth, how low taxes is directly correlated with more freedom, and how a reduction in the corporate tax rate will benefit these United States. Many feel a high tax helps the economy via government spending and government programs, but low taxes lead to actual economic growth, according to the Cato Institute. High taxes lead to work and investment being disencouraged. This makes sense, because if people get to keep less of what they rightfully earned, then they're going to work less. This leads to an increase in welfare, which is bad because there's also a decrease in employment, which means that government expenditures to people on welfare go up, and government revenues from people who are working and paying taxes goes down. Additionally, it's the private sector that spends and invests more efficiently and carefully. The key issue here is accountability. If a private individual or a private business spends their money terribly or goes into bad investments, they have to face the repercussions of going bankrupt or going out of business. This is not the case with the government, however, because they still know that they're going to get the tax revenue from next year. Another reason for why the government programs are usually less effective than, we'll say, the private sector is because of the temporary program myth. Temporary programs usually arise because there's a so-called temporary issue with a temporary fix. However, in practice, these temporary programs almost never go away. This is to the point where Milton Friedman said, "There's nothing so permanent as a temporary government program." And those who think that the government should do more, therefore taxes should be higher so the government can get more revenue, they're not really on the right track either, because as the Laffer curve shows, there's a point where you've increased taxes so much that revenue for the government is going to go down. So even if we want the government to do more, we should still decrease taxes. For example, if we have a 100% tax rate, then the government is going to collect 100% of zero. This zero revenue is not going to be helpful for anything, so they should reduce taxes. Next, we have the idea that lower taxes leads to more freedom. Money belongs to those who earn it, in a free country at least. Therefore, they have the right to keep what they've rightfully earned. Money doesn't just appear out of thin air. It has to be earned through a hard day's work and innovation. British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher once said, "Pennies don't fall from heaven, they have to be earned here on earth." She was right. And innovation doesn't only help those who received the tax cut, but rather it helps the entire society as a whole, as we all benefit from things such as inventions and all other forms of innovation. And the Cato Institute did a study, and personal freedom and economic freedom are directly correlated. The Cato Institute found that for every 1% increase in economic freedom, there was an average of a 3% increase in personal freedom. So those countries that give their citizens more economic freedom more likely also give them personal freedom. Lastly, many people feel that corporations should face a high tax rate because of their profitability and corporate greed. However, we would, as a society, all benefit from a decrease in the corporate income tax. A reduction in this tax would bring wealth back to these United States. According to CNBC, the U.S. has $1.94 trillion worth of corporate wealth in the United States. However, we have $2.5 trillion in corporate wealth outside of the United States. This means that over 56% of U.S. corporate wealth is held outside of the United States, therefore they pay no United States taxes. This makes sense because the corporate tax rate in the United States is a staggering 35%, but in tax havens such as Ireland, it's a mere 12.5%. So under the current situation, we have $1.94 trillion worth of taxable corporate wealth. multiplied by the 35% corporate tax rate would give government revenue $679 billion. If we were to lower the corporate tax rate to, we'll say, 12%, and then all of that revenue would come back, the taxable corporate wealth would be $4.44 trillion, multiplied by the 12% tax rate, would be $533 billion. Now, this does reduce government revenues by $146 billion. However, this is offset by three key factors. The first is that this money being in the United States would lead to additional economic advancement. Thus, the corporations would earn more profit and have to pay more tax, which would definitely help offset some of that $146 billion decrease. Secondly, this money coming back would create more jobs in the United States and thus have more people paying taxes, thus increasing government revenues. Lastly, having $2.5 trillion extra dollars in our country is much more significant than a reduction of $146 billion in government revenues. Then we have the issue of corporate greed. Many believe that corporations earn a profit, therefore they should be taxed more. However, the corporate profit helps our entire society as a whole because they represent jobs and they represent 9% of all federal government revenue. In conclusion, it's clear the U.S. would benefit across the board from tax reductions. Tax reductions increase economic growth. They also increase freedom, and having a reduction in the corporate tax rate benefits the U.S. as more wealth, capital, and jobs return to our shores. It'll be interesting to see in the future if the U.S. tax rates are lowered to benefit these United States. And here's my audience.